Hello, everyone. In this module, we're going to be studying foundations. If you're following along in your textbook, right here, the Kitchen and Bath Systems textbook, it's chapter 6. If you haven't gotten your textbook yet, don't worry, follow along for this week, and then you're going to need to catch up with a little bit of reading later. Let's get started. In this video lecture, we're going to cover first the purpose of a foundation. Why do we build a foundation? And then we'll cover, this is really the meat of the lecture, the different types of foundations and how they're put together. And finally, at the end, we'll tag on a couple of details about foundation size. How big do you need to build this? And some connections from the foundation up into the floor and wall systems. That's going to tie us into next week's content about floors. So, foundations. Your textbook says every house sits on some kind of foundation, which carries its weight and anchors it to the ground with a footing which underlies the foundation. All right, so the important bits here. One, the foundation carries weight. What weight does it carry? It carries the weight of everything above it, which is all of the materials of the house, everything that is inside the house, and the people and things that move around the house. Okay. The second important thing here is that it anchors it to the ground. So let's talk about the structural function of a foundation. What does a foundation do for you structurally? It transmits the load or the weight of everything above ground. It transmits that load down to the supporting soil. Okay, and the important thing is that you transmit the load without exceeding the bearing capacity of the soil. Okay, because if you did, you would punch through the soil and your house would settle. All right, and you really don't want that. So let's take a look at this illustration here. This is from a book, and down here you have the reference. I've abbreviated it to BCI, but it's called Building Construction Illustrated. And you'll see a number of illustrations from this textbook throughout our course. It's a little bit more advanced, more in depth than the textbook that we're using. But I definitely recommend it as a reference for anyone who wants to go farther. So anyway, this illustration is showing us a single post foundation and also a foundation wall. The load is coming from above. It's weighing on this foundation. And what the footing, that's the foot part of this, the footing below the foundation walls is doing is spreading out the load over the soil, okay, so that you give your house a firm base to rest on. So let's talk a little bit more about what happens if you exceed the bearing capacity of your soil. So your foundation supports the house, the soil underneath supports the foundation, so we're spreading the load over all of that soil underneath, the earth, the dirt, okay, under there, up to its bearing capacity. If you exceed the bearing capacity, you're going to end up with some structural failure, and here's a couple of different ways that it can happen. Your entire house could sink down. You could kind of sink down at an angle, or this is called differential settlement right here, where a piece of the house sinks and the rest stays, and you end up with some nasty cracking. All right, we talked just briefly about what a foundation is and what it can do for you. In the next video, we're going to talk about the different types of foundations.